Katie Sutton is here. Hello.
Hey, Jimmy McKay.
So this is my podcast, but we're launching your podcast on my podcast because we're launching a podcast network.
That is correct.
I feel like I used the word podcast like 11 times there, but it made sense, right?
Yes.
So the idea is I'm trying to use PT Pintcast as sort of an incubator for several handfuls of shows over the next 12 to 18 months. And yours is like going to be one of the first. And it's called PTA Plus. I think I mentioned that already. How would you describe it to someone? Like, we're just sort of formatting this thing, so there's no wrong answer. But if you were to try to tell someone like, hey, my show is going to be about this, what would you say?
Yeah, I think really what my goal for this show is that we have the opportunity to have PTAs that have additional things to bring to the table, because PTAs are generally more than a PTA alone. They typically have something else that they're doing alongside with that. So I just kind of want to highlight those things that PTAs are out there doing that are amazing and awesome, and talk about it.
And I like to consider myself pretty creative and I'm good at naming things, but you actually came up with PTA Plus, and it was because of something you just said there, which was like, I feel like PTAs are always introducing themselves like, hi, I'm a PTA Plus, I'm an educator, I'm a PTA Plus, I do this. It was always this PTA Plus these other things. So that's sort of where the name came from, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're just going to highlight all those other things that PTAs are.
All right. So we're going to launch PTA Plus. Right. So we're going to launch PTA Plus as its own standalone podcast. And then about once a month, for the first couple months anyway, to incubate, to sort of kick this thing off, to expose it to a large audience. So we're sort of what they call the idea of building in public, right? We could be doing all these things behind the scenes, but we're not. We're telling people, we're showing people our cards. We're like, we're building a podcast in front of you, kind of tearing back that fourth wall and saying, we're doing this. This is how we're doing this. So this is your first episode on your show. You're sharing it on my stream. Who'd you talk to? And like, what should people look forward to with this conversation?
The first person that I talked to is Chris Junkins. He is a PTA, but he is also just about everything that fills in that plus part to being a PTA Plus. So he's got all kinds of things going on. He's an athletic trainer. He is an advocate for PTs and PTAs, has been for many, many years. His historical perspective on PTAs is just outstanding. It's incredible, the amount of information that he has and the level participated in governance and pushing that ally. And he's going to be a great person for everybody to hear the first PTA Plus podcast. I'm excited. And
he was also featured in APTA magazine maybe a couple issues ago. The title of the thing was called like the Barefoot Gang or something like that, right?
Yeah, I don't know that was the exact title of the magazine or the article, but it was about the Barefoot Gang, which is essentially a gang of 8 PTAs that got together and became really good friends, close friends, and just accomplished all kinds of things. Back in the day, when PTAs really didn't have a whole lot of vote, and they didn't have a whole lot of say in APTA, and they stepped forward and got the work done. And I think that they set us on a track that's changed really the trajectory for PTAs today.
Love it. All right. Yeah. All right. So I love me some ado, but without further ado, I think we should just kick off the first episode of your podcast, which is made for what and by what?
For PTAs, by PTAs.
All right. So welcome everybody to PTA Plus. This is your show. Go ahead.
Awesome. Welcome everybody. Can't wait to talk.
You know, one thing I always impress with my students, the 32 that I've had, is wherever you work, make yourself valuable. Take advantage of any opportunity, because I never had a game plan. I mean, I came out of high school, went to PTA school, graduated from there, got my associate's degree and started working. And I've been a clinician throughout all of this. Got my bachelor's degree in 81. They had a sports program where you could become an athletic trainer. Back then, you could also become an athletic trainer. And then I passed the ATC exam. So I've also been an athletic trainer for about 22 years.
Another
sports.
blank that we can fill in.
Yeah. So, but it's just an opportunity. I took advantage of it, and it made me more valuable as a PTA. So.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PTA Plus Podcast. My name is Katie Sutton, and I am your host. This is a podcast where it is by PTAs for PTAs, and we talk all things physical therapist assistant. Thank you for joining us for our inaugural show. Today's guest is Chris Junkins. Chris is a physical therapist assistant. He is an athletic trainer. He is a co-business owner. He is an avid runner. Chris has been a clinical instructor for 32 PTA students, and that is just amazing and probably deserves an award of its own. So I'm pretty excited for you to hear his story. Chris is also a member of the Barefoot gang, and if you're curious what that is, you're going to have to listen to the rest of the show to find out. We are super excited to have Chris. I think that Chris might have to come back for another episode because he just has so much information. He has this rich background of physical therapist assistants, where we've been, where we're going. So we might have to bring him back along with the rest of the Barefoot gang. So this is a show you're not going to want to miss. We're excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy. Thank you for coming on, Chris. My name is Katie Sutton, and I'm the host for the PTA Plus Podcast. And we are a podcast that is for PTAs by PTAs. So the name of the PTA Plus Podcast kind of came about because when I think of the role of the physical therapist assistant, we are rarely ever a PTA alone. There's typically something else that we have our hands into at the same time. So we're always a PTA plus, and then we can just fill in our own blanks. And so for me, I'm a PTA plus, I'm an educator, plus I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate for the profession. I'm an advocate for PTAs. And then we can fill with anything we've got going on. And Chris, I'm so excited to have you because I think we can fill in a lot of blanks with you.
We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. So, Chris, you are a PTA, and you've been a PTA for quite some time.
You're frozen.
Uh-oh. Am I back?
I've lost you.
Oh, no.
Now I see. Now you're back. You kind of froze.
Okay. Well, hopefully
Sorry.
we can clean that up later. So,
Let's hope.
yeah, so you're a PTA, and you've been a PTA for quite some time. How long have you been a PTA?
So I started in August of 1976. So going on 47 years this August.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Not only have you been a PTA for that amount of time, but you've been a clinical instructor for 32 students. Is that what?
32 students, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And you're married to a physical therapist assistant,
I
correct?
am. Met her on my first job in Anderson, yes.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's crazy. Do you talk about anything other than physical therapy?
Oh, yes, we do. We have 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters, and life is full. Matter of fact, we're going on a trip in May to celebrate our 40th anniversary. We're rafting the Colorado River 7 days, 6 nights.
That is incredible, and I am incredibly jealous.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. We're excited. So
absolutely. You'll have to share photos later. Yeah, great. So just to kind of give our listeners a little bit of background, I met you at the House of Delegates, I think in 2021.
Yep.
So I think that was the first time I met you in person. Mm-hmm. And you and I were both running for an office position, and I lost.
And I did too.
But that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it was okay.
There's always something ahead, right?
But I was really
weekend. Yeah, it was. It was a great, and that was around our centennial too. So there was all kinds of amazing things happening that weekend.
It was an awesome experience to be there.
But what really caught me was whenever I was talking to you, I recognized that you had been in service to the APTA and to the profession for a long period of time, and you saw a need and decided to just go for it and fill the need if you could. Like, this wasn't something you had to do, was run for office. You just chose to do it and step up to the plate and help out where you could.
Well, yeah, I also had a lot of good mentors that kind of pushed me or asked me to go along the way. I know my first job in Anderson, John Dean, back then they called him chief physical therapist, and most PT clinics were in hospitals, and we did inpatient and outpatient together. And John Dean would close the clinic and take us all, PT and PTAs, to the state meetings and even to the national meetings. So he gave me my first taste of going to the meetings and seeing what that was all about. And after sitting in the meetings for a while, I realized that the people up there that were talking to me down there in the audience knew what was going on, and they were making the decisions, and they not that they had the power, but they had the inside scoop. And after a while, I wanted to be up there. I wanted to help make the decisions and be one of the movers and shakers. And it just kind of went from there. After I left his service, I joined, I moved to the beach, and I worked at Myrtle Beach Grand Strand Hospital for a year with a good physical therapist named Jeff Falkel. And he got me back into running. And as I told you earlier, running's been a big part of my life as well as physical therapy. And Jeff was an ex-Olympic swimmer who injured his shoulder, so he got into running, and he really pushed me. As a matter of fact, he bought me my first pair of running shoes. I was running in tennis shoes.
How cool.
So we hit it off, and we actually presented at the our state meeting in South Carolina on aerobics. Now, this was back in 78, so the aerobics was fairly new back then, new concept. And then he really pushed me into running. And then when I left there, I went to Rock Hill for about 13 years and worked with two great therapists who really pushed me to be better than I am. I mean, they taught me how to do physical therapy the correct way, ethically. The patient always came first, to be involved, to always take advantage of any opportunity that came my way. And it was a really good experience, because when I left there, I joined a very prestigious private practice group, Vaughn Buchanan Shelley, David Vaughn, Butch Buchanan, and Kirk and Janet Shelley. This group was amazing, and they were movers and shakers in our association, and they really pushed me to get involved on the state level and then the national level, and that's where I really took off. I got elected to offices, served on the state level, the national level. Butch was on the state licensure board, and he put my name in the hat. You have to be appointed by the governor to get on the state licensure board. So I was appointed to the board and served 19 years on the board. And the nice thing is that I was the first PTA to serve as chair of our licensure board. And also was a delegate for our meetings there and presented at one of the meetings there. So that was awesome experience. I'm still involved. Since I came off the board, I'm on the IRC committee, which is an investigative committee. So basically what we do on the committee is any complaints about physical therapy or PT or PTAs comes to the committee, then we decide based on what we're seeing, does it need to go on to the board to be investigated or not? So we have 4 meetings here on that. Anyway,
that's a tough job.
Through all of that, the people that I've worked with have really been champions to get me going and motivated and help me pretty much get into the positions I've been in, really. And it's been a good ride. And then after I left VBS, they sold. The 4 partners are retired, and things really changed there. So then I decided next time I wanted to work for myself. So I got, so some of us ex-VBS people started our own businesses, and Mike Dosher and I, and his wife, Kathy Dosher, and another partner, we started Dosher Physical Therapy. We will celebrate our 25th anniversary as a practice in April, this month, April 28th, I think. And we have 5 offices, and we have really done well. So it's been very satisfying to be an owner.
Yeah.
And just to wear that hat on top of everything else. And I still have been pretty well involved with all the activities on the state and national level too. So anyway, that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah. And like I said, you fill in a lot of those. I'm a PTA Plus. I'm a business owner. Yes. I'm a runner.
Right.
You know, we're never just a PTA. No. There's always something that we can add on to that. Yeah. So pretty impressive.
Well, like I said, too, you know, one thing I always impress with my students, the 32 that I've had, is wherever you work, make yourself valuable. Take advantage of any opportunity, because I never had a game plan. I mean, I came out of high school, went to PTA school, graduated from there, got my associate's degree and started working. And I've been a clinician throughout all of this. Today I had 11 patients. That's why I was almost late for this. So I've always treated patients as well as wearing the other hats. But even at VBS, Von Buchanan Shelley, they gave it. I got my bachelor's degree in '81, and they had a sports program where you could become an athletic trainer. Back then, you could also become an athletic trainer, not just through curriculum, but you could also do it through hours earned. So I got I think it's about 1,500 hours under an ATC. I had to take a couple of ATC classes, and then I passed the ATC exam. So I've also been an athletic trainer for about 22 years, covering
Another
sports.
blank that we can fill in.
Yeah. So, but it's just an opportunity. I took advantage of it, and it made me more valuable as a PTA. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I always tell people, my story is, and I'm not going to talk a lot about my story, but I went to one combined section meeting. My boss recommended that I go, and I showed up and I was absolutely clueless. And I remember like standing in the exhibit hall looking around and thinking to myself, I've been missing this all these years. I've been missing this.
Exactly.
And so what I did was when I got home, I went to the website for Ohio Physical Therapy Association. I started looking up the leaders in Ohio. I wrote down names. I found the people who I needed to talk to so that I could ask them questions. And it wasn't because I wanted to be bothersome or intrusive, but I felt that it was important that I knew who was making these decisions, who was in charge, who did I need to talk to, what kind of influence do they have. And I just kind of started hanging around. And I think eventually they were like, well, we're going to give you something to do since you just keep showing up. And so, I just kept showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
You just show up and they'll find something for you to do. So
absolutely. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So after our meeting, you and I met and got to know each other a little bit. And I don't know that we've really had the chance to run into each other too much since then, but it was like maybe a year or two later, I read this article in APTA magazine about the Barefoot gang. And I was like, hey, I know that guy.
So you read the article about the Barefoot gang.
I read the article about the Barefoot gang, yeah. And I was significantly intrigued. And so since I knew you, I figured I had an in. I figured you would be the first person I could bring onto the podcast because I wanted to pick your brain about the Barefoot gang. So can you tell us some about that?
So it goes back to, again, service on the national level. So we all had been elected to the National Assembly. So keep in mind, and we'll kind of get into this sometime later, but the PTAs have had three structures that give them a voice within the APTA and the House of Delegates. It started with the affiliate assembly, which I served in from, I think, 89 to about 98. And then the National Assembly came about in 98. And then we all were, the group of us, the Barefoot gang, there are 8 of us, were elected to office there and served on the National Assembly. So I was elected as vice president and chief delegate, and so I served in the House of Delegates with one delegate. And, we were the voice of the PTA in the House. We would bring forth motions. We didn't have a vote, but we could bring motions and we could speak to motions. And so the Barefoot gang was born out of that because we did some very intensive work. I mean, there was a lot of change going on at that time. Mm-hmm. And as the Barefoot gang on the board, so let me give you the names. Okay, so Debbie Borman and Nancy Brox, they were, so we had the background of this. So we had the National Assembly. So we had a board of directors, vice president, treasurer, secretary, a couple of directors. And then we had, just like the House of Delegates and APTA, they have a board of directors and they have a house. Mm-hmm. We also had a house.
So this is kind of like within the PTA.
It mimicked exactly what the PT House of Delegates were. So the PTA, they had one PTA delegate from each state elected. They would come to our meeting on Saturday and Sunday before the house started, the big house, the PT house. And so we would meet and we would have Robert's Rules of Order. You would have Debbie and Nancy were the presiding officer and vice presiding officer. So they ran the meeting. The PTA delegates would get up and present motions and speak to motions and pass or defeat motions. And then once we did all of that, then we would kind of form the RCs that we wanted to take to the House. So that work was done in our little mini house with Debbie Borman and Nancy Brock. David Emmerich was the president. I was the vice president and chief delegate. Brad Thuringer was treasurer, secretary. Cherie Metz, one of the Barefoot gang members, was secretary. And then John Limburger was my delegate under me. So we would sit in the house and we would do our business. Even though we didn't have a vote, I will say this, we learned to work the house very well. And what we would do is we would get other states that were, and I don't mean to sound this like it was adversarial, but back then there was a lot of controversy with PTAs and what they thought was too much time taken up with PTA issues in the House, which wasn't really true. Most of the PTA issues were brought up by other states, and we usually were just defending ourselves. But we would bring forth these RCs and get up and speak forth, and we would get most of them passed. 98% of what we wanted passed were passed. It was an interesting time. So throughout all of that, I mean, there was a lot of intensive work, and we decided too that the structure, the National Assembly structure, really wasn't working because it was too much work, and we didn't need to have a mini house to mimic what the House of Delegates were doing. We just needed to have a lot of work. A lot of work. We just needed to have a meeting, come together, speak about issues, and decide what RCs out of that meeting. Still structured meeting with some rules, Robert's Rules of Order. So our goal as the National Assembly, we had 5 key things that we wanted to see. Having come out of the affiliate assembly, and our leadership was not very strong because we were young and we just weren't on par with the PTs. We wanted to make sure that we had licensure for all PTAs in every state, because back then we didn't. Half the states had licensure, some had certification, some had nothing. We thought that was very important to get licensure because it ensures job security. Absolutely. So we got licensure. We wanted to get the full vote, which finally passed. And so PTAs now have a full vote on the chapter level and in most sections. And then we wanted to have some kind of advanced recognition so PTAs could be recognized for their service in certain areas. So we have that now. And then we felt like we needed a new structure, which became the PTA caucus. Excuse me, I got a call.
That was a long process to get to where you were, though. Like, this didn't just happen overnight.
No, that's what I said. And so that's how we became the Barefoot Gang. It was so much work, but yet we became very good friends because we were late nights. You know how the meetings go. You're up late nights, getting dinner when you can, early mornings. And I will say this, working with those people was probably one of the most incredible experiences of my life. We put our egos aside and we got in there and we knew, we just worked for the common good of the PTA and the association. And it was just amazing the things that we got done. It was just, those 7 people made me so much better. So anyway, we're close friends. And what we do now, have been doing for the last few years, we meet at each other's home states and spend a weekend or a week together and just travel around and see different things. So 2 years ago, they met in South Carolina, and I showed them the sites there. Last year, we met in Alabama. We met in Alabama with Cherie, and this year we're going to Tahoe. That's a long story. So a lot of us missed the Tahoe trip 2 years ago when John Lindberger lived out there because of COVID. So we want to go back and redo that trip. So we're going to Tahoe in June to get together again. And we just get together and have a good time and enjoy each other. We text each other about every day. We still talk about, we keep up with PT issues. And most of the Barefoot Gang are quite accomplished. They're owners of clinics. Debbie's the CEO of a hospital. Nancy's over, I can't think now. Anyway, she has some big title in the hospital. It's just amazing how talented all these PTAs are.
So. Oh yeah, that was one of the first things that I noticed when I read the article was every single one of you have an advanced degree. You didn't just stop at becoming a PTA. You furthered your knowledge and your education, and you sought more and seeking knowledge all the time. And I find the friendship part just very endearing. I have a group of friends as well that I know I can rely on for not just professionalism, like development and networking, and but also for like family and friend issues,
Exactly. Yeah.
life events and things. We can celebrate together and cry together. And I have a group as well like that. And there's something that's just really special about that.
It really is. I mean, they become your family or your second family. And you're right. You can go to them with anything. They're there. They got your back the whole time. And they understand because they've been in the profession, and and they're really smart people.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. And it sounds like now I have 7 more guests to line up on the podcast, right?
And you need to, because they will bring a unique perspective to everything about this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're listening, shout out, you're next. So we'll plan something to get everybody else on. So
Right.
yeah, awesome. So some other things that you have been into, you've been working on this timeline, a PTA timeline, or you've done some work on this PTA timeline?
Well, we just created it back, like I said, since I've been involved from the affiliate assembly through the National Assembly to the PTA caucus, there have been a lot of big events that have happened, particularly for PTAs throughout the years. Some good, some bad, but it's been interesting. We're in the right direction now. But yeah, it's a timeline, and it just kind of starts in 1964, and it just goes up to about 2017, because I've kind of gotten out of the loop after that, so I'm not really sure. And so now I understand too that PTA has a new structure. The PTA caucus goes away, and I think it's called a PTA engagement group.
Yes. So it will be called a council instead of a caucus, and act as an engagement group. Yeah. So there are definitely some changes coming, and I don't know, maybe you and I can work on this timeline a little bit. In the future.
Update it. You'll have to update it because you're the newbie now. See, I'm the old dog, so you have to carry on the tradition.
Well, I think that would be an honor to carry on the tradition. I love history. I had the opportunity to work on the APTA Centennial Steering Committee before we had the Centennial, and that was just an incredible journey. Lots of lifelong friendships that I made there, but so much that I learned. Like, you think the history of the profession, but you really don't. So the PTA, we turned 50, the PTA, in 2019, I think, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because in the timeline, they started studying what a PTA would be in 1967. It was an ad hoc committee to study the utilization and training, and back then they were called non-professional assistants. Mm-hmm. And then the first PTAs graduated from 2 associate degrees from 2 associate degree programs in 1969. And that was Miami-Dade, Florida, and St. Mary's campus in Minnesota. So that was the first 2 PTA programs in 69. And then...
And if I'm not mistaken, they're still going, right?
Those programs are, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're one of the oldest. And Greenville Tech, too. Greenville Tech's one of the oldest programs where I graduated from. I graduated in 76, but I think they had programs in this was 69. So I'm pretty sure we started graduating in 71. So it's a pretty old program, too. Very good program. So
yeah, absolutely.
But, and then, so then in 1970, PTAs were granted temporary membership at APTA. How nice of them.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And then in 73.
And then we kept hanging around.
Exactly.
They were like, fine, we're going to give you something to do.
Yeah, like gnats, and they couldn't get us away.
Yeah.
So in 1973, the PTA affiliate membership passed. The APTA House of Delegates passed that motion by 1 vote.
Wow.
To allow us affiliate membership. 1 vote.
Wow.
It was very, it was debated heavily.
Yeah. During that time, was that an additional, so you could be a member, but then you had to pay extra to be an affiliate member?
So that's when the affiliate assembly was formed in 1983. Cheryl, and this is some history that people need to know, because these are PTAs that started this. Cheryl Carpenter Davis, PTA MED, and along with Virginia Bunny May, who was a PT, and Tricia Garrison, who's a big name, a PTA, led a group of PTAs, and they organized the voice for the PTAs by forming back then it was the affiliate special interest group, and they began establishing regions and distributing newsletters. And then the House of Delegates in '89 amended the bylaws to approve the new component assemblies, and that's when the affiliate assembly was formed. And Carpenter Davis was the first president, giving PTAs a formal voice. So the affiliate delegates were elected from each state, and we actually sat in the House of Delegates because I was elected and sat. So we could sit with our state representatives in the House and speak to and all, but we still only had a half a vote in the House. PTs had a full vote. And the affiliate assembly board of directors consisted of a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, director, and 2 delegates. And you had to pay $25 separate dues to be a member. So that was the thing. So you could be a member of that and not necessarily be a member of APTA. So
wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Huh.
So that lasted until '98. And then, so the caveat with that was the National Assembly was born. Again, it had the board of directors and the mini house. The problem was they took us out of the house. So we couldn't sit with our delegation anymore. So we had our own little house. Our 2 delegates went to the house and sat. The PTA representatives, they were called RBNA reps back then after the affiliate assembly went away. So they would sit in the back of the room at tables, and they would pass notes to the delegates. I'd get notes all the time. Do this, do that. I'm thinking, you don't understand. You can't just do this, do that. So it was an interesting period. But so that's where the National Assembly was born.
Okay.
And we lasted 7 years and got a lot of work done. Really worked hard on the full vote. We did get the licensure, the advanced recognition, and the new structure for the PTA caucus, and we improved our leadership. Like I said, in the affiliate assembly back then, we would get too emotional. It just wasn't good because I sat in some houses where it was very uncomfortable sitting in the house because, PTs get up to the mic and they say things, and a lot of RCs were passed that there was one RC that was passed that said only a PT could own a PT practice. Well, there were several PTAs, including myself back then, that co-owned a practice. Now, that's a policy. It's not law, but that was APTA's policy. Only PTs could own a physical therapy practice.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that put us out of compliance. I mean, I wasn't going to sell my practice, but there you have it. And then they passed some other RCs that said, only a PT could perform certain procedures like sharp debridement and the manual manipulation stuff. Well, a lot of PTAs, including myself, did wound care forever, and I did sharp debridement. And so that kind of took that out of our hands back then. That's since changed and things have moved along, but I know that Pennsylvania came up with an RC that tried to, they wanted to limit how much PTA issues came before the House of Delegates because they felt like we were taking up too much of the House's valuable time with PTA issues. When in fact, the PTA issues were brought up by states like Pennsylvania to take up time because they didn't want us to do this or didn't want us to do that. So it was a rocky time.
Yeah, I bet.
But we improved our leadership a lot, and they were very professional and diplomatic. And we earned the respect of the board of directors through that time. And when the new structure came about, PTA caucus, Amy Smith was president, or she was. Well, they didn't have president then. We just had delegate, chief delegate, and delegate. And then the delegates met in the meeting, and Amy was a great president. I mean, she really. When the National Assembly went away and she became president, oh man, she really, and I remember when Amy was just a student, I never thought Amy Smith would be what she became. You talk about evolving from a green PTA student to a leader. Oh my goodness. Amy impresses me to this day. I mean, she's invited to be on panels and sit up there on the dais with the APTA leaders. I mean, she's strong.
Yeah. She
led.
Is incredible.
She really is incredible. And now you have David Harris, but all the leadership has really been just remarkable. And the PTA should be proud of the leadership we have because they've done an excellent job. So now we have the new council, and I don't know where that's going, but anyway, we'll see.
But you and your Barefoot gang friends and all of the other PTAs that you've mentioned and PTs, you all went through this evolution, this process, and it was long and it was hard and sometimes uncomfortable, but it sounds like you learned so much from that process. So like knowing that we're going into changes, what
Right.
what kind of advice would you give us right now? You know, we know we're walking into some unknown waters. So what's something that we should keep in mind moving forward?
The biggest thing is, keep an open mind. Don't get defensive. Listen to what everybody's presenting and keep the open line of communication. The biggest thing is listen, because if you listen, you learn. If you try to overtalk, you're just shouting at each other. So, with these new times and what's going on now, and I think, the base has been set by the past leadership that now I think APTA will listen more. And so when the two sides meet to see what's going on and how this new structure is going to go about, I think the new leadership will have the ear of the House or the ear of the APTA board. And I would anticipate it would be more, it'd just be easier to go through than what we went through. It won't be,
because you guys
I
laid the
wouldn't say
groundwork.
hostile, but yeah, it was, it got a little heated sometimes. But mainly, just be open-minded, but be firm in what you want too. I mean, if there's certain things, the PTAs have come a long way and we've gained a lot of things. We don't want to go backwards. And it's not that we want to be PTs or anything, but we just kind of want an equal say in the House because the House of Delegates is your association. It's not like in the clinic. Of course, in the clinic, the PT, they're in charge and we assist the PT as PTAs. We understand that. But on the association, that's policy and procedures that are passed that affect how I work. I mean, there were times, back in the day, they passed things that said PTAs were paraprofessionals, which we didn't like that name at all. We didn't ever consider ourselves a paraprofessional. We consider ourselves professionals, even though we have. And the problem was because they said, well, you only have a 2-year degree, an associate degree. So the PT is a professional, the PTA is a paraprofessional. Well, not necessarily. And I kept trying to make them understand there are a lot of bright PTAs, and you're just dismissing a whole group that could help solve some of these issues that we need to be facing, like reimbursement, fair reimbursement for the PT and the PTA, and direct access and things like that. Let's don't be infighting. We want to work together as a PT and the PTA to further the profession. And so I think we've done that. And I think the National Assembly advanced that. And the PTA caucus certainly has, with a good group of people like Amy, Sean Bagby, David Harris. There's so many names that, are out there now that are doing good work. I mean, I don't know what's ahead. I don't really know why the council has come about. Because like I said, I've been out of the loop with that. So I'm not sure why we changed. I thought the caucus was working very well. And I thought it would stay in existence forever. Of course, things do change. This will be our fourth structure since I've been involved.
Yeah. Change is inevitable, right?
Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah. I mean, the PTs don't change that much, but we certainly do. So, but that's okay. Like I said, I always thought PTA we were always evolving. From when I started in the 70s to the way we do things now, even the profession, we've evolved so much. So PTAs have evolved too. And there's even some talk about moving the PTA from the associate degree to the bachelor's. Now, there are pros and cons to both sides of that. Yeah. So there's a lot of pros and cons to both sides of that argument. So.
I think that you see a lot of PTAs now that do have additional degrees. I mean, I work in academia, and a lot of our students come in with a bachelor's degree already, or continue on to get another degree. I know I furthered my degree, but it wasn't in physical therapy. I went for my bachelor's degree, I got my master's degree, and would consider further education, but I became a PTA because I wanted to be a PTA. This is a career for me. It's not a stepping stone.
Exactly. Same here. That's exactly right. I wanted to be a PTA. I didn't want to be a PT. I got my associate's degree. I got a bachelor's degree in physical education and taught 1 year in PE. But I put myself through the bachelor's degree by working PRN as a PTA at the orthopedic hospital in Charlotte. So that helped. And then when I became owner of the clinic, I went back in 2009 and got my master's in management because I felt like I needed that to help run the business and all. So you're right. Back when I was coming up in the 70s, most PTAs graduated high school, went to the 2-year program, and that was it. But that all changed around the 90s, and then it became a second career. Like David Emmerich, who was president, and John Lindberger, they had careers before they became PTAs.
Yeah.
So PTA was a second career for them. And hence, like you said, a lot of these PTAs now, this is a second career, and they bring in so much more because they have degrees from other walks of life that kind of enrich them and make them more valuable within the PTA world or the PT world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that, just hearing what you've said about the evolution and what the PTA kind of looks like right now, but I think of all the names that you've mentioned, and many of those have mentored me as well. So I'm seeing those connections coming down the line. So everything you did was not for nothing because those connections have been embedded, and the names that you're saying, I'm like, yeah, they've mentored me too. Yes, they've reached out to me too and helped me. And yes, I've went to them for advice. So, I mean, it's just a pipeline that we've started to build, and we're looking at the future and what our future leaders look like. And I don't know that I consider myself a leader in anything, but I know that in the positions that I'm in and the positions that I'm serving, I'm constantly thinking about the future and what this is going to look like for PTAs in 10 or 20 years. But those things happened because somebody was willing to say yes. Somebody who's willing to say, yes, I'll work on this, instead of say, it's not my problem, or I'm not going to work on it. And this is exactly who you are. I'm going to call you a yes man, because when I reached out and said, hey, I'd like you to do this podcast with me. Have you ever listened to PT Pintcast? And you're like, I've never even heard a podcast, but sure, I'll come on.
Why not?
And I'm like, okay, who does that? Chris Junkins does that.
I do. Well, I got talking doing webinars, and, Sean got me doing webinars with him on certain things, and never done that before. I'm not, I've had to speak in front of a lot of people. I've had to do a lot of presentations and stuff. Never comfortable with it. Never. I'm never comfortable with the way I look on camera. I try not to be too geeky or move too funny. It's just one of those things. But I do have a passion for trying to move the profession forward. And also move the PTA forward. I mean, I'm a PTA, and I feel like we bring a lot to the table. I feel like we work, I think in the clinic, we are the glue of the clinic, not to put anything against PTs, but I feel like we're the ones who, when a PT's got a new eval that just came in, okay, I'll take that extra patient, put it on my schedule. I'll keep things rolling while you make sure that patient gets evaled. We're the ones who do that. And some PTs do that too, but basically it's the PTA, to me, that's the glue of the clinic that keeps things moving, keeps things running. They come in, they know, okay, I got this many patients on my schedule today. Oh, but you got to add these two because, okay, that's fine. Let's work it out. And I just think that we bring a lot to the table in many ways.
Yes. I think we have a lot of skills that are very transferable into other portions of life and other things that we do. And we're kind of like a chameleon. If you think of how many PTs that you might work under, and everybody kind of has their own ways and their own thoughts and theories and philosophies, and we align with each one of those to try to give the best patient outcome. So I've always kind of thought of us as a little bit of, a chameleon. We change to match and mold what the needs are of the clinic and the PT and the patient.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good analogy too, because you're right. In our practice, so we have a team, PTA team. We'll try to keep it that way. I know other clinics, you may have 3 PTAs under one PT, and in my career, I've worked under some really good PTs. They've always been, we've always worked as a team. They never felt like, well, you're just a PTA, you do what I say. They never do that. They listen. We work as a team. We collaborate. What do you think, Chris? This is what I think. That kind of thing. So I've been lucky, and that's not always that way. Other PTAs have their stories where it doesn't always work that way. But I feel like, if you can just communicate, work well together, because it's all about the patient. It's not about me. It's not about the PT. It's about the patient. That's the end game. If you just keep that focus, We're here for the patient. What can we do that works best for the patient? Everything should work out well. Communicate, talk about it, bring your skills to the table and that kind of thing. But like I said, I've been very lucky. Most PTs I work with have been great. And I'm still good friends with all the ones I used to work with and haven't been around, in a while. And it's been I have to say, looking back, and you making me do this, I think back on the career now, not making me, I didn't mean it that way. But I was just thinking
I kind of was like, please do this.
Yeah. But I was just thinking back with all the PTs I've worked with and how good they were. Even the young ones that I mentored some, because they would come to me and say, what do you think about this, Chris? And I would say, there's no shame in that. I mean, we all learn. I mean, I had enough, after a while, I got enough experience that I could help them with stuff. But, they were just some really good people. I miss a lot of them to this day. I thought about, I haven't seen so-and-so in a long time. And, you work 10 years in one place and 10 years in another, and you move around the state. And then I think back on all the, within our chapter, all the people I worked with on the state chapter level, the board of directors, all the presidents I've worked under, like Lisa Saladin Lisa and I, she's been very big in APTA. We are very close, very good. We've done so much work together. We respect each other. We are friends on Facebook. We see each other at the meetings, and it's like we just picked up. There's just so many. And I think back on how blessed I've been to have had this kind of career and to meet those kind of people, not just PTAs, but PTs, and how brilliant all these people are. And they've made me so much better because, you're just exposed to so many ideas, and it's just, I'm just lucky. I'm just very lucky. I think about it and I think, my gosh, the things I've got to do and the things I've got to see and the people I've got to work with and all the travel I got to do to all the cities and all the great dinners.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think that your work has been for nothing, because you have an award named after you in South Carolina. It's
you had to bring that up, didn't you?
I did,
yes,
because I'm thoroughly impressed. And of course, one of our good friends, Barney, just received that award. So I'm really proud of him. Yeah, absolutely. So congrats to Barney. But I mean, that's saying something. That shows that you've really put the work into it when your chapter recognizes you as somebody who has clinical excellence and has shown that and been a model for everyone. So way to go. My CV is like a quarter of what your CV is. And I'm thinking, so if I give myself another 10 or 20 years, maybe I'll come tiny bit closer to what Chris has done.
So I didn't send that to be showy. I wasn't trying to show off. I just wanted to, I give those to my students too, to say, look, I started out as a PTA. And this, I've taken, again, it's taking advantage of your opportunities and growing and evolving, and said, and this is where I came from, and this is where I'm at now. It's all because I stepped up, I volunteered. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to be one of the decision makers. And, after a few years, you just do enough stuff and you get, it just adds up. And so then you get this CV that looks like that, I guess.
Well, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading it. So I'm glad that you did share it with me. And I didn't find it showy at all. I think that it's a great representation of everything that you've done in your work.
Thank you.
I'm just super excited that now I have the opportunity. And now that I have the hookup with the rest of the Barefoot gang, maybe I can be like the wheel, the third wheel.
We need a wheel sometimes. We get rudderless.
Yeah, so you've given me an in with the rest of them, and I can't wait to talk to everybody else, because I'm sure their stories are just as incredible as yours.
They are. They're amazing people, all of them. Very amazing.
Wonderful. Yes. Awesome. So the one thing that I like to make sure that we get to do before we end this podcast is I like for my guests to be able to give us a plus point. So some words of wisdom, some advice for the physical therapist assistant or the profession. So do you think you have anything you could share with us, a plus point, something to help us send off the podcast?
Well, my plus point would be, even the young PTAs, once you start out, get your footing, get your bearings, learn your craft, but then do get involved. Don't sit on the sidelines, even if it's just going to meetings and finding out what's going on, or join a task force or something like that. It bothers me that a lot of PTAs won't be members, period. They miss so much. It has enriched my career and made me so much better by being a member all these years. And the money is well spent. And, you shouldn't use excuses like that. Get involved, try to make a difference, be the voice, because if you don't, you're not a voice. And somebody else is going to decide what your career is going to be if you don't step up and do it. Be an advocate. I mean, I go to our advocacy days on the state capitol and talk to my legislators. And I go to the national ones and talk to my congressmen, and PTAs can do that and should do that, just like PTs. The future, I think, is bright, but it'll be brighter if again, you step up, be a voice, be a member, be an advocate, get in there, make sure that the profession is going in the right direction. I mean, it's just as simple as that, really. Just be there, be accountable.
Absolutely. Great plus point.
Well, thank you.
So, yes. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Everyone, Chris Junkins, thank you for hanging out with me this afternoon. I'm so glad that we were able to learn from you. I think that I've learned a lot. I'm sure that everyone else is going to gain a lot from this as well. So we appreciate your time, Chris.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Absolutely. And we'll meet again.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. We're done.
We are done. Yeah. So okay. Jimmy will cut it off there.
So I can go now, or you want to talk some more?
No,
you guys are good.
Okay. There he is.